So, Secretary Bessent, you and I agree that it is a conflict of interest for members of Congress to trade stocks. Do you also agree that it's conflict of interest for President Trump to trade stocks?
Well, a couple of things, Senator. One, President Trump is not sitting in the Oval Office engaging in a high-frequency trading strategy. Clearly, he had an outside manager who was doing that. And
that's Senator Elizabeth Warren. Across from her, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, a former hedge fund manager, and she's about to catch him in a trap built entirely out of his own words. Here's the setup. Last year, before he joined the administration, Bessent backed a ban on members of Congress trading stocks. His reason? He said their returns were so good, every hedge fund would be jealous, and that if a regular citizen traded that way, the SEC would be knocking on your door. His words. Then Trump's own financial disclosures came out. And according to those official filings, the president's accounts made more than 3,400 stock trades worth over $250 million in just the first 3 months of this year. So Warren asked Bessent a simple thing. If this conduct deserves an SEC investigation for a regular citizen, does the same standard apply to the president? Now, I want to be upfront with you before we watch. The trades are documented fact. Whether any of it crosses a legal line is a separate question. One Warren says should be investigated and one others dispute. We'll get to both sides. Watch.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Secretary Bessent, let's start with something you and I agree strongly on. Last year, you came out in support of a trading ban for members of Congress, and I have introduced legislation to do exactly that. You explained the need for a ban on our trading stock by saying, quote, you look at some of these eye-popping returns, every hedge fund would be jealous of them. And that, quote, if any private citizen traded that way, the SEC would be knocking on their door. Those are strong words from someone who used to run a hedge fund. Last month, President Trump's latest financial disclosures came out, and they show that he made more than 3,400 stock trades worth more than $250 million in just the first 3 months of 2026. That's roughly half of what all 535 members of Congress made last year combined. And the value of virtually every one of those stocks that the president traded in is directly affected by President Trump's official actions. So, Secretary Bessent, you and I agree that it is a conflict of interest for members of Congress to trade stocks. Do you also agree that it's conflict of interest for President Trump to trade stocks?
Well, a couple of things, Senator. One, President Trump is not sitting in the Oval Office engaging in a high-frequency trading strategy. Clearly, he had an outside manager who was doing that. And I think it's incumbent upon both houses of Congress to get their house in order before you move to the administrative branch.
You think it's okay for the president to do this? Because let's be clear, you are a Wall Street guy, so you know better. The investments that President Trump has made are not blind. President Trump literally signed the 113-page document publicly listing all of his individual stock trades at the same time that he is making decisions affecting those stocks. So you're going to sit here with straight face and say it's not a conflict of interest for the President of the United States to do that?
I'm going to say this body needs to get its house in order first.
How about we get the White House in order at the same time?
I would encourage you to do that.
I don't trade in individual stocks. I don't own any individual stocks. My house is in order. Thank you.
Senator, you're very
Mr.
rich.
Secretary.
Others on this committee can't say that, Senator.
Let's look at some individual trades. On January 6th, Donald Trump purchased up to $1 million worth of NVIDIA stock. 1 week later, his administration changed U.S. policy and loosened the rules on export controls so that NVIDIA could sell its chips to China. Now the price of NVIDIA stock is through the roof. So, Secretary Bessent, you said last year, if any private citizen traded the way members of Congress do, quote, the SEC would be knocking on their door. So my question is, should the SEC be knocking on President Trump's door to start an investigation over this trade?
Again, if this body wants to ban individual stock trading, which I would advocate for yourselves, start there. And if you want legislative action to continue, that's your prerogative.
So it's our prerogative. So you would support our saying that President Trump should be investigated over this?
I would support
our
would
trade
support,
should be investigated, and President Trump should be investigated.
I would support you getting your house in order, Senator.
And how about the White House getting its house in order?
Again,
would you support that investigation?
Please lead by example.
I would like to see the President of the United States lead by example. You say there should be an investigation when that kind of activity takes place. How about we start with the White House?
Well, you create
one
statute.
More.
The President does not.
Trump bought tens of thousands of dollars worth of stock in Robinhood and the Bank of New York Mellon Corporation, known as BNY. On April 6th, your Treasury Department announced it had chosen the financial agent to implement the new Trump accounts program, BNY and its partner, Robinhood. Both stocks, of course, have risen since then. So, Secretary Bessent, let me ask you a different question. If these stock purchases that Trump made were made using inside information, would that be illegal?
Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to speak to that. And I think...
Would it be worth investigating? You don't have to be a lawyer. You're the one who said what should be investigated.
Why don't we investigate many people on this committee, Senator? Many people.
And you don't think the White House should have to follow the same set of rules that are already the law?
I think you should get your house in order here.
My house is in order. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
And you should have your fellow committee members, mostly on your side of the aisle, do the same.
We need stronger anti-corruption rules and conflict of interest rules in Washington for everyone. And that includes the president and it includes Congress. And instead of draining the swamp, what Donald Trump is doing is he is enriching himself by taking advantage of his position. That is not public service. He's the one who should lead by example.
All right, let's break down what actually happened and let's be careful with it because this is exactly the kind of story where the details matter. Warren's whole move was to use Bessent against himself. Last year, he called this kind of trading something the SEC should investigate. This year, asked whether that standard applies to his own boss, he wouldn't say it. His answer, over and over, was Congress should get its house in order first. Warren's reply was clean. She doesn't own individual stocks. She wrote the bill to ban congressional trading. Her house is in order. The deflection had nowhere to go. Then come the numbers, and this is where people's eyebrows go up. According to Trump's official disclosure, his accounts made over 3,400 trades worth more than $250 million in 3 months. Warren says that's roughly half of what all 535 members of Congress traded in an entire year. And her key point, this wasn't a blind trust. Trump personally signed the 113-page document listing those trades while making policy decisions affecting those same companies. And here's the example that got the most attention. On January 6th, Trump's accounts bought up to $1 million of NVIDIA stock. About a week later, his administration loosened export rules so NVIDIA could sell chips to China. The stock climbed. So Warren asked Bessent directly, if a private citizen did that, you said the SEC would come knocking should they knock on the president's door. He wouldn't answer. Now here's where I owe you the full picture, because I'm not going to hand you only one side. Warren is raising a question and calling for an investigation. She is not proving a crime, and I'm not going to tell you one has been proven. Investment professionals who looked at these trades told CBS News the sheer volume actually makes insider trading hard to establish. Some of it looks like routine tax strategy. And Trump says he doesn't manage the money himself, that outside managers handle it. Those points are real, and you deserve to weigh them. But here's what stands on its own. No interpretation needed. A year ago, this Treasury Secretary said this exact behavior should bring the SEC to your door. Today, asked if that applies to his boss, he wouldn't say yes, he wouldn't say no, he changed the subject. You don't need a verdict to notice that. The question Warren asked, would that be illegal, and shouldn't we find out, is a fair one, and it went unanswered. So here's what I'd leave you with. Follow the money. Ask for the same rules for everyone, the president and Congress alike. And when someone won't apply their own standard to their own boss, notice it. That's the job. If you want breakdowns like this, subscribe and turn on the bell. I'm Sam Carter, a Democrat, and proud of it. See you next time.